Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final summer webinar series Ethics for Addiction Professionals. So just a couple of housekeeping things. If you happen to be attending this on an iPhone, I have found that you can either look at my image or you can look at the slides, and you can usually slide one way or the other on your screen to go between the slides and me. You do have the handouts available to you. You'll see in the right hand column. So everything that I'm showing here, you do have access to. Then in regards to questions, I'm really counting on questions in this webinar. I think you're kind of brave attending a 3-hour ethics webinar. I think I'm brave kind of trying to do it. So if we could be interacting, I think that will be helpful, especially toward the end when we are using what we learn here in tackling some vignettes that I have found and created. So you can raise your hand. So if you look on your little column there on the right, you'll see a hand, and if you raise your hand, I will see that, and that's just like raising your hand, and then I can actually activate your microphone so you can ask the question live. Now, this is being recorded, so if you don't want your voice on the recording, then don't do it that way. You can just ask a question down in the questions arrow down below. You can just hit that and you'll see where you can type in your question, and I'll be checking that from time to time. And then again, if you are watching live, right after I end the webinar, you'll be sent automatically a post-test and evaluation, which is very short. You'll just fill that out and then submit, and it's from that I will generate your certificate. Okay. So I think, and then if you're not watching live and you're watching the recorded version of this, then you'll be sent the post-test and survey afterwards. I will email it to you. Okay, and then I think that is it. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So let's see here. All right, so let's go ahead and just define ethics and kind of set it apart from other things like law and morality. So ethics really is a set of principles that guide our actions. Okay, so it guides our actions, not our morals. It guides our behavior, what we actually do. Okay. And then ethics versus the law. So whereas ethics are parameters that guide our behavior, law consists of a clear set of predefined rules that are punishable in a court and defined at state and federal levels. So law is clear cut most times. So you kind of know if you're breaking the law or not, and it's punishable. So in ethics, it's not so clear cut sometimes. Sometimes we're actually just looking at the best possible action, all right? Because there may be many different directions that we can take, and we need to be able to figure out, okay, what is the most ethical route to take? And my hope is that the principles that you'll be reminded of today or learn today will help in you being able to determine that. So then, and then just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's necessarily ethical. You know, many people, a lot of people would think, putting somebody in jail who's got a disease could be considered unethical. And then ethics versus morality. So again, whereas ethics are a set of principles that guide our actions and pilot our professional conduct. See, there it is: actions, conduct, behavior. Morals is a person's basic core feelings of right and wrong. Now, I teach an ethics course at LMU, and at this in this class, we get many people who are in recovery, and this seems to be the toughest one for folks who are learning ethics, because especially when people are in recovery, they have just such strong morals. I mean, this isn't to say that people aren't in recovery don't. It's just the people in recovery maybe get them back. But so they have this, this core feeling of what is right or wrong. And sometimes ethics pushes back on that. And it doesn't mean that the morals should, because they feel right, should trump ethics, because ethics is not emotional, right? Ethics are, we're taking some principles and we are applying them to a situation, and no matter how we feel inside, we need to listen to that. Now, this doesn't mean we don't listen to our insides and our gut, and actually that is one of the things that we take into consideration. But we don't say, nope, that doesn't feel right, so I'm trumping it. We take it into consideration, and we try to make the best possible decision. Okay, and then so ethical dilemmas can really mean two different things. So there's at least two possible courses of action, all right, and or a clinical error has been made, and we're trying to figure out how to rectify that. And we need to learn how to both avoid and cope with ethical dilemmas. So let's come up with some examples of ethical dilemmas. So does anybody want to type in an ethical dilemma? For us here, like what are you seeing out there in the profession ethically that kind of is going wrong? While you may be generating that, let's go ahead and look at some here. So discharging clients that use in residential. So sometimes it's just like an automatic knee-jerk, they're out. And really, if that decision is made because leaving the person in the treatment milieu puts the rest of the clients at risk, and or they tried to take them out with them, absolutely, you've got to make a change. I would look at our programs to see what we bring to the party, right? So if they used, what is it about my residential program that allowed somebody to be able to use? Did we not, search their stuff? Are we not monitoring visits? That kind of thing. So I think we really would want to look there as well. And if we're able to, make whatever changes, or if we're able to, feel like, okay, it's not going to be a danger to the rest of these folks if I leave the person in here, then maybe you can leave them in, because we don't want this to be punitive. These folks have a disease, as we know, and we want to support them in getting better. So then another ethical dilemma, although it's getting more and more clear cut to folks, that MAT, medication-assisted treatment in residential treatment, including methadone, Suboxone, and naltrexone, some people are still pushing back on this, and I'm going to not go too far out on a limb here to say that it could be considered unethical to not allow MAT. There is research that shows that MAT works. And if we are not allowing MAT in our programs, then I think we're not giving our folks every chance to get this. So now, especially like say like naltrexone and Suboxone, I mean, there are definitely studies that show that the use of those medications work. Now, if we were a profession where we really our success rates were like through the roof, and we didn't feel like we needed that to improve anything, maybe you can make a case. But the relapse rates are so high, we just have to look at things that are working. There is proof, there is scientific research that says that medication-assisted treatment works. And I get it, you guys, I was really slow on this. The history of our profession of, things like using, cocaine for heroin addiction, and, benzodiazepines to cure alcoholism. you know, that stuff is in our history. So when we get a new med that, you know, is you know, seen as, you know, some sort of help, some people would even say a cure, but I'm not going there with this. That, you know, it scares us. And so, but this stuff has been around. I have seen, I got to tell you, I've had some really incredible personal experience with this. I was working for an agency that was doing naltrexone implants. So now naltrexone, basically there's the pill form that you take every day, but you got to count on, and now this is for both alcohol and opiates, as I'm sure you're aware. The pill form, you got to count on the alcoholic or addict to take it every day. Then there's Vivitrol, which is a shot that lasts 30 days. And then the naltrexone implant lasts anywhere from 8 to 12 months, and it's a little pellet that they put, you know, under the skin. And when I started my private practice, they were feeding these clients into my private practice, and I was teaching them how to develop a support system and tools of recovery that they will have in place once the pellet dissolves. And I'll tell you, I never seen anything like it. I had people that were, you know, telling me, you know, I've been in and out of treatment like for years, and I just don't want to drink, especially for the alcoholics. It was just amazing. And these folks were, and then, you know, the pellet was wearing off, and, you know, and we didn't really realize, you know, when it was wearing off. So we would, like, you know, test them, you know, for it at about, you know, 9 or 10 months. And usually when we tested at that point, it was gone, and their you know, their cravings, you know, just hadn't increased. And we had them work in a program of recovery that allowed them to still to stay sober in the long term. So this stuff does work, and we really need to take a look at it if we're not allowing it in any form. So then, and then, you know, and I will say that, okay, so there's a personal opinion about methadone. So I think that methadone is indicated for some folks, but to me, it's kind of a last resort. Treatment has just failed so many times, and the consequences are so high. We just got to get this person stabilized. But I still think that maybe Suboxone is a place to start, because it doesn't kind of numb them if you're on the right dose. And so anyway. Okay, so then harm reduction in treatment. So here in California, in many of the counties, we have the Medi-Cal waiver, and so it's just awesome. I'm so pleased about this. That really, if you're below a certain income, all you got to do is get on Medi-Cal, and you can get any level of care. Wow, that is such a big deal. I mean, you know, there's old stats like, you know, 1 in 10 who seek help get it in this country, and 2 in 10, or I'm sorry, 1 in 10 who need it get help, and then 2 in 10 who seek help get it in this country. And I think those numbers are really going to change now. It's just incredible. But what's happened is, at least here in LA County, they don't want you to you know, discharge somebody based on repeated relapses. And so what, you know, and so you know, you want to kick them up to a higher level of care, which I absolutely agree with. But they don't. I mean, the mentality is you just don't discharge people. So if they're you know, their residential has run out and now they're outpatient and they're still using, it seems that the expectation is that we be okay with, like, harm reduction in treatment. And although you know, you may have your own opinions about harm reduction, I'm kind of an abstinence guy, but I do see the value in it in some cases. But the problem is, when you're trying to do harm reduction in an abstinence-based program, you've got people that are in harm reduction and people who are trying to stay abstinent in the same group. The harm reduction can actually sabotage what you're trying to do in the abstinence-based groups, because, you know, you have people that are talking about using just recently, and that could be a trigger in itself. But then, you know, it seems to be okay, like they're not being asked to leave, or, you know, oh wow, this harm reduction is like a thing, sign me up for that program. So you have people who might otherwise be going for abstinence, and now they're seeing that harm reduction is an option. And I don't, I just haven't seen that great of results with that. So you got people crossing over to harm reduction, and it's to me kind of sad. So, in the consulting that I do at programs, I have been recommending, if at all possible, and a lot of programs don't have the means or the space to do this, but have a separate harm reduction group. And how this could work is, so people who aren't going for abstinence and maybe are in the pre-contemplation or early contemplation stages, you have them in a harm reduction group, which is very educational and very motivational interviewing in nature. And then some of them may actually move along the stages of change, and then maybe they're more appropriate for an abstinence-based group. So that's my take on it. And then so discharging clients who have affairs with other clients in residential treatment. So I have one thing to say about that. Of course they did. Or we need to have a setup that's not going to allow that, right? So again, in the consulting that I've done, I've had programs like install cameras because what they were doing just wasn't working. They had separate wings, but people were just figuring out how to hook up, and so they put cameras in, and it's pretty much eradicated the problem. So we really need to look at our programs and our structure to see how we can prevent that from happening. Okay, and then all right, so let's see, accepting, let's see, I have a question here from Jean. Thanks, Jean. Accepting monies for referring a client to a facility for treatment. Oh yeah. So this is a really horrendous problem. I've actually had some personal experience with witnessing this myself. It so much gives our profession a bad name. There's already this thing because of the high-priced programs that that we're all in it for the money, and we really get a bad rap sometimes because of this. And then when you hear about accepting money for referring clients, it's really bad. It's one of the worst forms of exploitation of a client. And I'm going to just give you an example. There was a place, there was a place that was doing the naltrexone implants, and it was, I got word that somebody had been paid, a client had been paid money to get the implant. I'm like, wait a minute, where does that come from? And I was like, oh, this guy that's bringing clients must be getting kickbacks. He must be getting paid for these referrals. It was the only conclusion I could come to. So I went to the owner of the program, and basically with my resignation, and I said, I can't continue anymore because of the ethical practice that's going on here. She's like, what? It's like, well, you guys are paying for referrals and you can't do that. And she was like, what? You can't do that? I'm like, no. She's like, well, we pay marketing people. They get paid for marketing the program. I said, but that's different. So, and I tried to lay it out to her, which I'll try to lay out for you. So if I am somebody that is a trusted referral source, like you're coming to me as a professional, a certified, alcohol and drug counselor, you're trusting it with me. So you come to me and that you trust that I'm going to get this person, refer this person into a good program, right? Well, let's say that program A is just like an unethical, they're program, just program centered, you've heard some really bad things about it, had some bad personal experience with it. You've heard maybe some monkey businesses going on there, and they're willing, and I'm engaged in monkey business, and if I'm accepting money for referrals, and they're willing to pay me $1,000 for a referral. Got program B that is like one of the best programs around, had personal experience with them, very ethical, great program, great staff, great leadership. but they're only willing to pay me $200. So if I'm an unethical, counselor, right, I'm going to send them to where I'm going to get $1,000. So do you see what happened with this client? I've been trusted to send them to a good program, and because of how much this program is paying me, I'm sending them to the other program that isn't as good. That's complete exploitation of our clients, and it is so sad. And if you see it, please call it out. Anyway, I explained this to this person, and they actually ended up, making some changes and quit the practice. And they actually hired a person who, that was they hired this person as a full-time marketer, and so it kind of took away that. So they were just, drawing a salary. So it ended up okay. And I felt really good too, because my ethics were such that I couldn't be part of anything like that. And I stood up and pitched, a complaint about it, and actually it changed. So that was pretty cool. Thanks for that, Gene. So so if anybody else has any examples of ethical dilemmas that they're seeing out there, please go ahead and type in your question or raise your hand if you don't mind having your voice on the recording here. So reliance on 12-step meetings, sponsors, and faith-based programs. So, I got to tell you, I admit I used to be one that says, 12-step is the only way, and if you're not ready for 12-step, well, then you're probably not gonna get sober. That was very early on in my recovery, and boy, unfortunately, I probably had that unspoken mentality in the very early going, and I just know that that's so not true. And there's some clients that are just going to dig their heels in. We really need to have other options. And I know in my private practice here in Long Beach, I have found that you don't need to have 12-step to get sober. I do like what the late great James Crossan out of Pierce College, he used to say that 12-step is not the only way, but it seems to work the best for the most. I really like that, and that has been my experience. So if somebody is resistant to it or they've had a bad experience with it, I will try to educate them and let them know that, you may have been at a meeting where there's nobody that you can relate with. Maybe it was a lot of low-bottom drunks and you're, a working class person, and there are meetings where you will be able to relate with people, and we'll try that. Maybe it's the higher power thing, and I help them work through that. So I will help them leap their hurdles of resistance prior to sending them to some other kind of meeting or program like Smart Recovery or Life Ring, Celebrate Recovery, the Refuge Against the Stream kind of thing, which I don't know if part of that went away, I think. But anyway, we need to have that. In my case management course that I teach, I actually have my students do an assignment where they need to go to a 12-step meeting. If they already go to meetings, go to one that other than what they usually go to. So if they usually go to AA, go to NA. And then I have them go to a non-12-step meeting like Smart Recovery Against the Stream, Life Ring, Celebrate Recovery, and compare and contrast the two. And the feedback I get is one of the most valuable assignments that they get, because they really didn't realize that these other programs were viable. And some of them were like, well, now I know why I send them to there first. But all around, it's a really good assignment. So and I will tell you also that in my private practice, I've seen really amazing things happen without any kind of ongoing meeting attendance, even, which you might be going, wait, what? Okay, so and what this was, this person didn't believe in any kind of higher power, and as much work as I did with them, they just could not go there at all. And then they were going to meetings for a while, and then that just kind of fizzled off. But here's what happened for this man. In the time that he was in AA, I insisted on the value and the necessity of having other alcoholics and addicts as part of a sober support system. And I held it out as the most important tool of recovery. And I told, so basically he had actually a friend or two that was in the program, and that he made that part of the sober support system. There were a couple of people that he met when he went to meetings for that period of time. And so he ended up with about 4 or 5 guys that he was in regular contact with. They would get together for barbecues and stuff. The guy doesn't believe in any kind of higher power. He doesn't go to meetings, but when he is going to be in a high risk situation or is not doing so well, he reaches out to these guys, sometimes just via text. And, he sent me a text the other day. He told me he's got like 3 years sober, and that's the way he's done it. So, we can take different parts of the program, like, the part of the fellowship, the part of 12-step, which was one alcoholic helping another. We took that out and we used it, and the guy is really doing great. He just seems to have a happy, comfortable recovery. So we got to be flexible there. If we are insisting that 12-step is the only way when there's these other programs out there and they're just not going to do it, that's really, it's not ethical. So then time limits on program participation. Let's just see here if we have any more. Okay, so time limits on program participation. So, because of managed care and the counties, now managing the care with the Medi-Cal waiver, they do have time limits on certain levels of care. Excuse me. And then if you're in a private for-profit program and you have insurance companies who are like being very stingy with days, and that this person needs more treatment, and you have made a case that if this person leaves treatment right now, the chances of them staying sober are very, very low. Well, ethically, we as a program can't discharge them, okay? So what I've done in the past in managing programs is I kind of put them on a fast track of getting and building the sober support, getting them into a situation where we can discharge them from the program and try to hook them up with the community resources, get them, so they're attending meetings that have a sober support system that they're tapping into, and seeing if there's any way to get them some counseling that maybe they can afford. But I have to know that there's at least a reasonable shot before I discharge them. And sometimes that's tough, especially if you're in a situation where they're taking up a paid spot. But we need to be ethical, and we need to take into consideration the do no harm. Paying and receiving money for referrals, Jean pointed that out. And then keeping clients longer than necessary. So, there's many different reasons for this, but one of the more diabolical reasons is because you get more money when you keep them longer. Some of you may have been around this profession long enough to remember an article in the magazine LA Weekly about a program that was really at the time the most expensive program that I had heard of. They may still be the most expensive, but I think they're still around. Basically, what was happening was there were reports that there was no firewall between the people that were making the money and the clinical staff. So, for example, there was a family in Arizona, and they had sent their son, their young adult son, to this program, and the person was there for 2 months. I believe it was like $60,000 a month, and they were there for 2 months, and the clinical staff had made a decision that this person was ready for discharge. But the owner had got word of this and trumped it and said, oh no, this person isn't ready, and basically made a phone call to the parents, scaring them, saying, you know what, I know my clinical staff said this, but they're mistaken, and here's all the reasons why. If he leaves, he's certainly going to drink, and we know his drinking pattern is dangerous, and you might lose him. And so this family was compelled to pay another 60 grand for another month, and on the face, it pretty much looked like this decision was based on money. And so it is very important to have a firewall between the person who is actually making the money from the program and the clinical staff that can make a non-biased, neutral clinical decision. I know that programs that I've worked for, I've insisted on that, and so even though, you know, maybe the executive directors of the programs will have opinions, and some of them have like very good opinions, which I will listen to, but I need to have, as the supervisor, as the clinical supervisor of the program, I need to have the final say, and not be, you know, and feel like it's safe for me to do that. And I've been in those situations, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because it's just, you just can't, you know, when there's that much money at stake, especially at a private for-profit program, when this person in the bed means tens of thousands of dollars, we you know, it just can't be set up that way. And then smoking cessation is another ethical dilemma. So one part of this is that you know, a lot of our clients do smoke cigarettes, and that is a chronic disease, you know, as well in itself. And we as programs need to offer some sort of smoking cessation program. So, you know, we need to find out in their assessment, not only do they smoke, but do they have interest in stopping smoking. And you know, a lot of people are like, you know, we don't want them to take on too much. In fact, that was the mentality when I got sober. I was a smoker, and they were basically, you know what, one thing at a time, right? We'll take care of the smoking later. Right now, we got to stop the bleeding of your addiction. And it made sense to me. And so I actually did quit 2 years later. But a friend of mine by the name of Joan Waddell, she worked for a program that was getting funding. It was the National Council, and they were getting funding for educating people on educating programs actually on smoking cessation. They actually had a program where they, you know, they had staff. It was called the elephant in the house. It had little elephants, and each person that was a smoker, their name was on the elephant. They put it in the house, and it was interesting because everybody wanted to get out of the house. They wanted to get the elephant out of the house, and so one by one, you know, the idea was one by one, and I experienced it myself. You know, people were stopping smoking because, you know, of the focus on it. It was great. And then they were educating people on smoking cessation. And actually, this program was responsible for getting all of the South Bay beaches here in Southern California smoke-free. And one of the things that she packed in her arsenal was research that shows that people who try to quit smoking cigarettes at the same time as stop using alcohol or drugs have a better chance at staying sober when they try to quit both. Isn't that something? You would think it would be taken on too much, but people who take on that, both the smoking and the alcohol and drug abuse, when they do it together, they actually have a better chance at staying sober. Isn't that something? So we need to offer something. There's another piece about this ethically that I'd like to call out, which is counselors smoking with residents. I know some of you are like, oh, and some of you are like, oh, he's actually going to bring this up. Don't go there. Yeah, I'm going there. Anybody have any idea of why this might not be a good idea? I'll just wait for a second, see if anybody wants to type in a question. Here's our chance at getting some involvement. If any of you came late, I'm encouraging question asking. You can raise your hand and I can activate your microphone, but don't do it that way if you don't want to be on our recorded version of this. And then down at the bottom, you can type in questions. So I don't see any, but okay. So there's a couple different reasons. One is that we're really modeling behavior that, you know, I mean, smoking is deadly, and we're engaging in behavior that is considered deadly, and we're modeling that for clients. Another reason is that it creates dual relationships, right? So I not only am this person's counselor, but we're kind of smoking buddies here. We're bonding on this level, on this like sick level. So I really am a proponent of having a separate smoking area for the staff and for the clients. I get a lot of pushback on this. Oh, well, it's just our way to bond and all that. And I get it, but let's try to be the type of counselors that are warm enough and are good enough at developing therapeutic alliance that we don't need tobacco to do it. And and Jean says it encourages behavior to smoke and defeats any further dialogue about the benefits of stopping all addiction at once. Yeah, absolutely. Good take. So there's that. So let's talk about some of the actual tools that we use. Okay, here's another one, and also plus staff wouldn't shoot up or drink in front of clients, so it's the same thing. Ooh, going for the throat there. Love it, love it. Thanks for your questions, Jean. All right, so let's get into some of the principles that we're wanting to teach here that can help you. I mean, my main goal here is, we wanted to have the discussion about all of those different areas, and you might have some later that you think about that I would love to hear. But I want to give you or increase the value of the lens by which you look at an ethical situation. So sometimes we have this ethical sense, and we feel like we know the right thing to do. But using these principles and a lens by which to actually look at these principles is very, very valuable, and it will increase our ability to come up with the best answer. So I want to tell you, and I didn't do this. So as we're getting into her information, a good friend of mine by the name of Dr. Jennifer Burden. She actually was on the KDAC board with me, and she was actually the ethics chair at one time. She wrote just an outstanding book on ethics, and it's actually the same name as this talk, which is Ethics for Addiction Professionals. And she does really a great ethics talk as well. She moved out to the East Coast. I miss her dearly. But I use her textbook in my ethics class. It is just really that good. She has very good takes. It's a very personable book. It's just like you're talking. She's talking to you like she's right in front of you. But very, very wise, very experienced, and so she came up, and so this talk is mostly based on her information. Yeah, I'm giving my takes and stuff, my interpretations and stuff. But the meat of this talk is really, and it really helped me to structure the talk using her book. So thanks, Jen, for that. So she talks about the 4 keys to clinical practice, and it's recognizing your strengths and limitations, respecting the tiers of ethics, seeking continuous learning, and making the rule. So let's go through some of those. So recognizing your strengths and limitations, we all have our histories, we all have our individual personalities, and therefore there are some people that we may be better at treating than others. And so we need to know what our limitations and strengths are in regards to who we work with. And so Dr. Burton actually came up with a like this kind of self-assessment. And so I don't have it to show you, but I can just, it's basically, it's like a decision matrix, just basically 4 boxes, right? And it goes personal, professional, and then strengths and limitations. And so you just fill that out, and it's a really super good tool to really get honest with yourself about people that maybe wouldn't be the best for you to work with. Now, look, I get it. I want to be able to work with everybody, and I want my boss to be able to count on me to be able to work with everybody. But sometimes there's situations where maybe there's multiple counselors, and you can maybe say, I think this client would actually do better with another counselor. For instance, like let's say if I was, molested as a child, and I'm still working through that stuff, right? It would be tough for me to, maybe be working with, a child molester, right? That makes sense. So now, if I had, done, if I had been far enough along in my recovery from that, maybe I would be okay doing that. Another might be like, let's say, uh, uh, oh, I don't know. Let's say a victim of domestic violence. It would be, it might be very difficult for me to work with either the perpetrator or even the victim, right? Because the victim is maybe talking about what happened to him or her, and I'm like, I got some, we have some, countertransference going on, and it's like I'm not feeling like maybe I'm far enough along in dealing with that stuff to really be adequately able to work. Now, on the contrary, if I have done the work, and I've gotten to a place where I'm, I've resolved some of those issues, and they don't affect me so much anymore, I might actually be better able to deal with somebody. But we need to know personally what are our strengths and limitations in order to really know who we're best to work with. And then it also, like if there's a situation where maybe you're not the best, but you can still work with them, that you at least are aware of your strengths and limitations, so that, if stuff's coming up for you, that you can address it, and you can, hopefully have mentors and supervisors that you can maybe talk to about it. So I like that take of Dr. Burton. So then respecting the tiers, we're going to deal with this stuff a little bit later, but here are the tiers of ethics. So there are federal, laws like, HIPAA and CFR 42 Part 2. You got state, which an example of that would be, mandatory reporting. Licensure would be, our scope of practice and, our code of ethics. In an agency, be policy and procedures and maybe employee handbook. And then personal, which is our own ethics and morals and what we believe is the right thing. And these should be taken into consideration. And it's really a hierarchy here. So, the federal would be, what we would listen to first, and then so forth down the line. So, respecting the tiers is important. We're going to actually use this, talk about some of that a little bit later. And then seeking continuous learning. I'm a huge proponent of this. Now, I know that some people get into this profession as maybe, a second, or third or whatever profession, and maybe later in years. And so, the thought of maybe going back to school and getting a bachelor's or a master's just isn't practical at this point. I get it. But if you are young enough to do that and you can figure out how to do it, I strongly recommend it. The work that we do, is hugely important. And people, when they don't get it, they die sometimes. I hope you haven't had to experience that, but I have, and it's really a really lousy feeling to have a person sitting in that chair one day, and then like the next day they're not there, and you find out that they either relapsed and OD'd or off themselves. It's just horrible. And so me as an ethical counselor and one who wants to be I just want to be the best I can be. I want to give these persons the best possible chance at recovery. And so I'm continually trying to learn more about this. And so I did actually go back and get a degree in psychology. I got my bachelor's, and actually it really helped my career, because some of the positions I got, I never would have gotten without that degree. I'm getting up there in years myself, but I still have my eyes on getting a master's. I had said, when my kids are grown and moved out, that maybe I would do that. Well, they're grown, not quite all moved out, but I'm really strongly considering doing this. and I've got a school that I'm actually thinking about. So, and then the continuing education, when you're getting your CEHs, don't just get ones that are like the cheapest and the easiest. You know, find areas that you actually maybe feel weak in and do ethics trainings on those to really enhance your skill base, or things, you know, maybe new ideas about recovery that maybe you can learn and take on, and of course we learn through practice as well. So whether or not you're younger or older, and in whatever form it takes, seeking continuous learning is really important. We owe it to our clients. And then making the rule. So in making the rule, and remember this, because it might be a post-test question. So making the rule is establishing a standard of behavior, a set of actions or rules of conduct that are maintained most of the time, okay? So, and then, so, you know, once the standard is established and maintained, then exceptions can be made when the situation calls for it. So, for example, I admit that I have been in situations where, as a counselor and a primary counselor, sometimes our caseloads get very overwhelming. And sometimes I would get behind on my charting. So I would, you know, maybe there was a crisis after my group, and you know, and I was working a swing, and it was just too late. I needed to like get out of there, and I'll do my charting tomorrow. But then when I come in, you know, my supervisors hit me with something that I gotta take care of, and then, you know, the day just gets busy, and sometimes, you know, if I'm not planning my day and having boundaries, my day will just kind of like take me rather than me taking the reins of my day. And then now I don't do it that day, and now I've done another group. Now I have two sets of things. So, you know, I've had times where there's maybe been a few days, I admit, where I didn't do my charting. So you know what happens when you're trying to catch up on 3 days of charting? There's at least some level of creative writing going on there. You can't help it, because you just can't remember everything that's, you know, that's happened, and which thing happened which day. And so I needed to make a rule about this. And the rule was that I get my charting done that night, that same day that I do it. And I got to set boundaries to do this. Now, if there is just like some sort of crisis, or maybe I'm feeling sick, or just something's going on that won't allow me to do it, I can do it first thing the next time I'm in. Okay, that's you know. So the rule is that I do charting the same day. That's my rule. The exception is if I can't do it that same day, I do it first thing the next day. Okay, so you see, the rule is do it the same day, and I'm trying to maintain that, but I have the rule in place, and sometimes exceptions occur. Okay, but if I don't make the rule, right, you know, you got to make the rule to even have that to break. If I don't make the rule in certain areas, I'm living by the exception, and I'm all over the place, right? Could you imagine if our whole profession was just like didn't make the rule in regards to certain things, and just did it, you know, by the seat of their pants, and you know, I mean, it would be pretty chaotic, not only in the professional's life, but in our profession. It really wouldn't look very good. So make the rule in regards to your ethics and the things that you do. Make the rule, and then follow that rule, knowing that there may be some times where you need to make an exception. Now, there's some things you would never like want to make an exception for, but you get my drift, right? So the making the rules, establish a set of behavior, a set of actions or rules of conduct that are maintained most of the time. Okay, now Dr. Burton, I'm going to call her Jennifer. She won't mind. The 4 common pitfalls that lead to ethical dilemmas. So she points out these 4 things: conflicted agendas. So, you know, one such thing is self-disclosure. You know, so I may be a recovering member of the fellowship, but I'm also a professional counselor, and so Sometimes maybe my feedback is from the professional counselor, and sometimes my feedback is from the AA member. Well, this shouldn't be happening. I'm a professional counselor and I need to come from a professional stance. Doesn't mean that I never will do this, but I certainly would never lead with this. I've had many interns in the programs that I've managed, and one of the things that's really been difficult, is kind of untraining people from being, sponsors to being counselors. So, sometimes people get into this profession, they want to they got this gift of sobriety and they want to give this to folks even on a greater basis than maybe sponsoring or reaching out to people in the program, and they have a passion to do this work, and so they come in thinking, man, I'm a really good sponsor, I'm going to be really good at this. But what they do is they lead with feedback, with their experience, strength, and hope, right? So that's what a sponsor does. They lead with their experience, strength, and hope. A professional counselor does not lead with their experience, strength, and hope. What they lead with is their knowledge of the tools of recovery, what it takes to be sober, helping to identify the things that may be in the way of sobriety. Yes, and we do provide hope, encouragement. We connect with them. We develop this therapeutic, alliance, and then only maybe, when therapeutically needed, would we break out a personal experience. I kind of made the rule on that myself. My rule is that my rule is to not do self-disclosure. The exception, no, actually, my rule is that I use it minimally, and the times that I use it there's two examples. One is, let's say I'm working with somebody, and maybe I'm giving them a tool of recovery, and they're kind of glazing over a little bit, and they're not really getting what I'm trying to convey to them. Sometimes if I can provide my personal experience, either working with people or my own experience, giving them a practical application of using the tools, I might do that. However, I also, sometimes I will go third person on it. I don't say it's me, I just say, it's somebody else that I know. The other example is, like, let's say somebody's really in a lot of pain and they're dealing with something that's really super difficult. And I feel like, because I'm empathizing there, but I'm really feeling like my letting them know that I truly do have some idea of what they're going through, I might do it there. But again, it's very sparing. And again, my rule is I never would lead with my experience, strength, and hope. And I don't know that that's one where I would make an exception for. Okay, and then so confused roles. So it's very important for us to be clear on our scope of practice. We're, part of our assessment process is to identify what it is that's going on with them that is in our scope, that things that we are certified to treat, and what are things that are outside of our scope. Okay, and so if we do an assessment and we come to the conclusion that we can treat this person, that this person meets the criteria for our program, but they also are going to need some therapy, and we don't have therapists on staff. Well, then we refer them and coordinate care so they can get the counseling that they need. They may have medical problems. There may be like a detox issue, but as a clinical supervisor, even though I'm the clinical supervisor and my counselors might come to me and say, hey, do you think this person needs detox? If there's any question at all, they come to me. But if I have a question, like, that's not my scope. Okay, so if I may feel comfortable, just something that's like super obvious, I may feel comfortable making the call. But if there's any gray area here, I always have them call our medical director. He's the one that needs to make the call. It usually would be the call that I would make, but he needs to make that call. I would bring up, one thing here in regards to like family group. Don't you need to have a therapist for family group? I don't think so. I actually started my career as a family counselor. It was very education based, and but I need to be clear on what I'm doing. The scope of practice, I mean, this is actually written in regulation, like for an MFT, is they're doing counseling for the purpose of improving interpersonal relationships. We can't do that as alcohol and drug counselors. Now, the work that we do might result in that. It certainly could, but that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is trying to create an environment that is conducive to recovery, okay? So some of the things that we teach that will make the environment conducive to recovery is boundary setting, communication, right? Having everybody in the house know what this disease is, having the family as a whole know what recovery is, like what does a recovering family do to be a recovering family? Teach them about systems theory and and all that. So we're teaching them things that are going to help make the home environment conducive for recovery, and in some cases actually getting the family started in recovery, even if the identified patient isn't ready yet. So as long as we're doing it for recovery, so we're either helping family members to get into recovery from codependent issues, or whether it's us having the family get into recovery for, not only for their own recovery, but also to create the environment that's conducive for recovery for everybody involved. That's what we're doing. Could that result in improved interpersonal relationships? Absolutely it could. In fact, it probably would. But we can't have that mentality that's why we're doing it. We are doing it to get this family into recovery, teaching them tools of recovery, and creating an environment that's conducive to sobriety. And by the way, I do believe that one of the things that we do as counselors, as alcohol and drug counselors, is we're trying to stop the bleeding, right? Some of you who know my work know what a big deal I make it, that we need to help our clients use the tools of recovery to cope with uncomfortable emotion. And I believe it's one of the most important things that we do. And so as I go to programs and I do group evaluations, and I train supervisors how to use this tool that I created. And so in those groups, I'm really encouraging that the groups are like a training ground for people to learn that they can feel and experience uncomfortable emotion, and learning that they can do it with the help of sober support, and then we translate that out into their environment. So some of the things that are causing the emotions, some really deep stuff sometimes, but we're not helping them to resolve those issues. We're helping them to learn that they actually can feel and experience the uncomfortable emotion associated with it, so that they can stay sober long enough, so we can stop the bleeding long enough, right? And then we refer them to a therapist who then can help them resolve some of those issues and really go back to the source, and and do some more of that reframing, and maybe some some family of origin trauma work, EMDR, whatever they're doing. Okay, that's for the therapist. I do believe that every single person that gets into recovery should probably be referred to therapy, or to just be evaluated to see about the need for that. Okay, and just a reminder, we have a scope of practice. So your certifying body has one, and so I would, if you don't have it handy, print it out, and just have it around somewhere, and just have a look at it every once in a while. I think it will help us stay in our lane. Next is clinical burnout. So, and an example of one cause of this is faulty supervision. I want to tell you that when I first became a supervisor, I was not a very good one, because I learned supervision from my first boss, which was my father. And let's just say it wasn't the healthiest of work environments for me. And so, you know, it was kind of a push your weight around kind of supervision. Like, I'm the boss, you'll do what I say. And I found, you know, and in trying to do that, you know, I would fall back on that. But look, you just need to do this. I'm the boss, and you know what I say goes. And I may not have said those words, but that was really my mentality. It was a very ineffective way of supervising. And then I actually had a boss who was a good supervisor and was able to not only, you know, I mean, he was firm in what he needed to have happen, but he would listen to my input, and he would support me in achieving what he was expecting me to do. And he also was able to compliment me on the work that I was doing. And so, like, when I was first a supervisor, you know, I basically kind of had the headlights out. I'm giving you this because some of you may become supervisors, some of you may be supervisors. And so maybe this is just a review, or just, you know, a reminder, or maybe you need this. So my headlights would be out looking for, okay, what is in the way of this being the best program it can possibly be? What is in the way of the clients getting the best care? And I was very quick to point it out, and that was really how I saw, you know, my position. What I didn't do was look for things that were going right. What were people doing well? This was reflected in their performance evaluations, their annual performance eval. So basically, you know, we use a 5-point Likert scale: 5 excellent, 4 good, 3 satisfactory, 2 below standard, and 1 needs like immediate improvement. So anything that was a 4 or above, I wouldn't provide really any feedback because it was good or excellent. Sometimes on good, I would put something, but it was always something that they needed to do to make it better. Okay. Anything that I left blank or a 5 was, you know, I didn't really have, you know, much feedback, and I didn't put it because it wasn't something to improve. So all they got was, they got their scores. Yeah, 5 probably felt good, but there was no comments of like why they got a 5. You did excellent job here. You're a model for the organization here, right? And so, you know, I got in the practice of every time I gave a 5, you know, or a 4.5 or some, you know, high mark, you know, I would compliment them on the work that they did. And when I was providing the one-on-one supervision, I was very, I became very good at being able to show people how they're doing well, but also to show them how they can improve. And I always came from a standpoint, it's like, we're not making a bad counselor good, we're making a good counselor better. And that was really the attitude that I had. And the other thing is, and so it wasn't, you know, I really never said, look, I'm the supervisor and this needs to happen. It was more like, okay, this is what we need as a program, and I really need this to happen. And I want to support you in doing this. So do you think that you would be able to do this? Or do you need some, like, maybe some time management help here? Or do you need further help in understanding how to do this? And typically they don't want any extra supervision, so they'll get it done. And, you know, and so, you know, that we'll continue to monitor it. And it's important for me as a supervisor to continue to monitor it. So the next time I do a one-on-one supervision, I need to take a look and see how they're doing. And if they're doing great, give them some really good positive strokes for the improvement. If it hasn't improved yet, we talk about it, we find out why. And there, you know, I may need to give them a verbal warning or a written warning if it's something that's important and they're just still not doing it. All the while, I'm not just saying, look, this is something you need to do. You need to figure out how to make it happen. No, it's my job as their supervisor to make sure that they have what it takes to make it happen. Okay, I take that responsibility on for myself, and because of that, they feel supported. And so if there is some sort of further disciplinary action, it's not that they haven't had or been given the tools that they need. They haven't been given the supervision, and it's really no surprise. And it's usually because, not because they're not capable of doing it, it's just because for whatever reason, they're just you know, they're doing it their way. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that because we get folks, many folks who have had backgrounds where they weren't treated very well, and they weren't given positive strokes, and they were demeaned and put down and belittled. And if we do that as supervisors, we can really tap into that trauma. And you know, when we're in a supervision position, we are in a position to really affect positively or negatively their lives. In an instant, we can either make their day or just knock them down to where that trauma is activated and or their shame. And so we just really need to just be aware, if you're in a supervisory position or if you are in the future, just what an impact your supervision has, not only on a person's performance, but on their well-being personally. And frankly, if we are demeaning them or activating their trauma, how do you think they're going to be when they're dealing with your clients? They're not going to be able to be there fully for their clients because they're too much into their stuff. And I also would teach my coworkers the same thing, that if a coworker is going to you, be nice and be supportive, because that person might be getting ready to go in the group, and they have bad interaction with you. They might, it's hard not to carry that stuff in. So I really try to promote a healthy work environment. Okay, so now according to Burton, excuse me. Okay, I don't see any hands or questions. I invite hands and or typed questions, so just want to remind you of that. So according to Burton, if your agency does not provide a supervisor for you, which basically is ethically unacceptable, it's on you to seek supervision out. So if you're in a position where you're a counselor and you're not being given supervision, it's your ethical responsibility to get some. Now, some people, there actually are people, including myself, but people that have been around for a while that actually get paid to be, some sort of stipend to be there, to be that kind of supervisor for them if it's on an ongoing basis. Sometimes it's just mentorship, which I have people that kind of use, have used me for that, and I'm not charging them for it because it's far and few between. But we all need to have that person who, even if we do have a supervisor, that person that's independent of the program, that we can kind of go to, they know their stuff, and we just want to run this past them. And I'm totally, open to that. I've done it, a lot, and sometimes, people say, I want this on a more regular basis, and they'll pay me for it. But so it is our responsibility. And so even if you couldn't afford some sort of supervision, or you feel like, man, I shouldn't have to pay for that, just have somebody that is willing to have those conversations with you. So if you are in a situation, especially an ethical one, that you can go to somebody who knows their stuff, that you can go to, even if it's like a very experienced peer. Okay. So, she also states that it's not advisable for your clinical supervisor to actually be your boss. You can see how this could be an issue. Like, I'll use the example earlier. Remember, we were talking about our personal and professional strengths and weaknesses. If my clinical supervisor is my boss, the person that signs my checks, the person that has the ability to promote me, I'm going to be a little more hesitant to maybe share my weaknesses with them, right? I'm going to want this person to know I can work with anybody, right? And if there's maybe an ethical thing that's coming up, or there's something I'm struggling with a certain client, if the person's my boss, I'm not going to be as open to going to this person, because needing help, I want this person to not think I need help. Heck, I want the supervisor position. I want to be promoted there. I want to be the person that people go to, not the person that needs, all of this help, right? So if it's a supervisor that's independent of being my boss, I'm much more prone to go to that person and ask them for the help and support and feedback than I would be somebody who's in a position to be my boss. Now, sometimes it's not practical. Sometimes your clinical supervisor is your boss, but for those of you who might be starting programs, or maybe you're in a position that you have some input in your program, that's Dr. Burton's recommendation, and I would back that up. And supervision, as I mentioned earlier, could be summed up here too as it should be a mixture of support and challenge, right? So we want to give them support and we want to challenge them to be better, and they need both. And we need that to be good supervisors. All right. So then, supervision is also a vital part of the process of dealing with ethical dilemmas. Sometimes, like, you might be in a situation where, your supervisor maybe isn't, maybe you feel like they don't have, the integrity or the wisdom that maybe you're comfortable with, and you don't really trust them with the situation, or maybe about them, then it needs to be taken to the next level. And but when you do that and you take it to that next level, you need to have a good reason. Okay, you need to be able to verbalize the reason to that next level of why you're not doing it, because otherwise it seems that you're like not following that protocol. And so this is both an FYI and a CYA. Cover your butt, right? Something interesting about the supervision. So in my ethics class, I have them use these principles to tackle clinical vignettes and ethical dilemma vignettes that depict ethical dilemmas. And I have them use like 3 principles that they learned in class to answer the question. And anybody that brings their supervisor in, that's one. They could use that for every question on that final, and they get credit for it, because any ethical supervision should include some sort of supervision, whether it's in that program or whether it's outside. A supervisor should always be brought in. That's what we get paid for as supervisors, right? I mean, I remember early on in my supervision career, it was like, man, it feels like all I ever do is put out fires. Well, yeah, I finally realized that's what my job is, right? I get paid for that. I get paid to make those kinds of decisions and to help make those kinds of decisions. So bring those people in. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. Okay. Let me get back to, okay, where is my, okay. All right, so next, the next common pitfall is cutting corners. An example of this is like accepting gifts. Other ways of cutting corners, pre-charting, like, having a chart, having a chart note that you would do for a particular maybe education group, and everybody like gets the same, note, and you do it actually before the group starts or whatever. I think the county, you couldn't do it because they have timestamps and stuff now, but another, cutting corners would be, let's say you got a treatment plan, you never look at the treatment plan, and then you get to, maybe it's the residential program, and all your due dates are within 30 days. You get to that 30 days, and none of the treatment plan is done. And then you just basically copy and paste the treatment plan and just change the date. That would be another example of cutting corners. Accepting gifts. I just want to expound on that a little bit. And basically, Dr. Burton. Now, some people, really believe that you should never accept gifts of any kind, and others think that it's okay given certain circumstances. There are certain cultures that it might be a real insult to not accept a gift. Sometimes, maybe a person did a thing of art, and they put a lot into it or something, and or it's a card, an elaborate card or something, or anything like flowers or chocolates or a gift. I would sometimes I would say, I can't accept this personally, and I appreciate you doing this, and but I can't really accept gifts, but you can donate it to the program as a whole, and I do appreciate that. A couple of just things that I want to say about this before I sum it up with what Dr. Burton has to say about it. In the informed consent, or somewhere in the paperwork that they sign before the intake paperwork, somewhere in there, put your policy on accepting gifts, right? So that they see that to begin with. It will hopefully deter some of that. And if you If you're faced with that situation, you can always fall, you can fall back on that. Remember, when we signed this, that I really need to, to stick with that. You can just blame it on the policy. And I'll tell you that my favorite, I'm going to call intervention, when somebody gives me a gift or wants to give me a gift, is, I really appreciate those Laker tickets, but I really can't take them, and I really appreciate it, and I feel like, you're showing me your appreciation. So what I want you to do is, I get a little emotional even saying this, is, what are you trying to tell me by giving me these tickets? Can you put in words what you mean by that? And have them actually verbalize whatever it is, whether it's, an appreciation of, whatever that is, and support them in actually having that, that conversation with you, as intimate, as uncomfortable as it might be, to really encourage them to do that. I think it's in their best interest to be able to do that. I think it's a wonderful intervention. Don't remember who taught it to me, but I think it's really good. Dr. Burton actually says that, some things, regardless of what your take is and what your decision is, that these things should be taken into consideration. So what is the client's intention on giving this gift? What's the potential effect on the client, the clinician, and the therapeutic relationship of accepting this gift? And what potential effect, if any, on other clients or the agency and of the profession if I accept this gift? So if everybody in our profession accepted this gift, what would that look like? If I accept this gift and it's something that, like, let's just say it's a little, piece of art and I put up on my counter, and another client sees that, maybe you're not aware of that, and they try to give me a gift, and I push back on, I'm sorry, I can't accept that. And they're like, wait, you accepted theirs, why not mine? So these are things to be mindful of in accepting gifts. Okay, and then protecting the client. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let me take a breath here. And a drink of coffee. Oh, did I break out my my date of sobriety cup? Yes, I did. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I just celebrated 30 years of sobriety last December. Thank you, thank you. I'm very blessed. So disclosure and informed consent. So the client needs to be protected. I mean, that should be one of our number one focuses, is really protecting them, and protecting them against us, against them, and so they have a right to choose when they're entering into a counseling relationship, and they should know there shouldn't be any surprises. When they sign up for our program, they should know what is going to happen here, okay? What is going to happen in this program? So they should see a program schedule. They should see the different things that we do, group and individual and education and recreational therapy and all the different things that we do. So that they know and they can expect these things. And so when they actually sign up for the program, they know what they're signing up for, okay? And so they have a right to full disclosure in multiple areas. And then a little bit on client rights. So the right to confidentiality, the right to be accorded dignity. So the confidentiality. And I think we're going to deal with it later. But we've got the CFR 42 Part 2, and we've got HIPAA, and to be accorded dignity. I'm just going to stop here for just a second. So I really am very happy with the direction that our profession is going in regards to becoming client-centered rather than program-centered. Some of the old school, and there's been programs that are been around for 40 years or more, and they're good. They've helped a lot of people, and the mentality sometimes can be is our program is really good as it is. And if you do the things that we do, you too will get well. That's a program-centered approach. these are the things that we do, and if you do them, you too, your life will improve as well. As opposed to coming alongside the person and you know, asking what they want to get out of the program, and showing that you're willing to do that. I won't go too much into that, but I will say real briefly, if I am holding up and saying, yeah, according to this assessment, you need to get sober, I may be aligning myself with the family member or the judge or the DCFS that asked them to, you know, requested or mandated them to go into this program to begin with, rather than me saying, okay, so we had this assessment, I see some things here that we can help you with. What would you like to get out of the program? I just don't want to go to jail. Well, we can help you with that. So you see how I've aligned, you know, with the client. And the reason I brought this up now is to be accorded dignity. The reason I brought up this program-centered versus client-centered, some of the old residential programs have a very strong behavior modification component to it. And when I say strong, I say, you know, what I'm referring to is there are some practices in behavior modification that really have no business in chemical dependence treatment, and they're practices that are not trauma informed. I've seen programs, you know, there's the old Synanon, which was, you know, kind of, you know, the break them down, build them up kind of mentality that's sometimes referred to as attack therapy, where, you know, the client would be, you know, maybe sitting in the middle of the room and everybody would like take turns, you know, just pointing out things about them that need to improve or change. And the person would be really, it was kind of this break them down, build them up kind of mentality. And sometimes a person, you know, the person would be very demeaned. Well, you know, if somebody, you know, has trauma, especially people who have trauma issues, you know, from their past with physical, emotional, mental abuse, verbal, sexual, I mean, their trauma can be activated by that stuff, and we can actually be doing more damage than good. You know, and so they need to be accorded dignity. You know, I've actually heard this said, you know what, it doesn't really seem like you're ready for recovery yet. You may just need to go out there and, you know, come back when you're ready and we'll be here for you. Are you kidding me? If they were so doggone ready, what the heck would they need us for, right? We need to meet our clients where they're at, whether it's pre-contemplative or contemplative or preppers, wherever they're at, we need to meet them there. We need to be ready to help them there. We want to try to help them move along to a place where they are maybe receptive to help. But if they come to us and they're not receptive, part of our job is to get them there. You know, we don't let them go out there and experience more consequences before they have a chance at recovery. That's absurd. And you know, somebody, you know, is actually in a position to receive help, and you're saying, no, go away. That goes against, you know, providing, you know, behavior that would be considered dignifying. So they need to be afforded safe, helpful, and comfortable accommodations. So we want to make our treatment environment, you know, as pleasing to the eye as we can. You know, sometimes, you know, it can be very depressing for somebody who goes into an environment that is just, you know, dirty and unkept, and, you know, it's just very clear that there's no attention to making this any kind of a warm environment at all. And so we want to so we want to do what we can to make it comfortable and safe for them, and to be free from intellectual, emotional, or physical abuse. And I think I covered that when I talked about you know, treating them with dignity. We need to be a trauma-informed profession and not do things that are going to activate their trauma. Okay, and so let's see, let's go ahead and go to, so some more client rights, to be free of discrimination, including religious or spiritual beliefs. So if people are met with, like if they don't believe in any kind of higher power and it's a 12-step oriented program, how is that person treated? Are they treated like a freak? Are they treated like people who just aren't getting it? Are they demeaned? Are they given less of a chance at sobriety? Are we trying to put a, fit a round circle into a square hole, so to speak? Or are we meeting them where they're at and trying to help them figure out a solution that works given their beliefs? Okay. So, and if we don't, it's really discriminatory behavior. They need to be able to make complaints. So, in our informed consents, we have a full grievance procedure. They need to be very clear on if something's going wrong, what do they do? And what might some other client rights be? Here's another audience participation thing. Anything that we missed? Thanks, Christine. So I'm sitting here, I'm wondering, so we're at almost an hour and a half. I wonder if we should, I should give you a chance to just take maybe a 5-minute break. Well, I tell you what, why don't we do that, get up, stretch. 3 hours is a pretty grueling thing. I could probably use that myself. So let's just take 5 minutes to just stretch and, just come back in 5 minutes. And if you have anything to add here on the client rights, go ahead and do that. And if you have any questions, this would be maybe a good chance for you to put them there, and we'll catch up. And I am counting on you guys for questions. We have plenty of time for them. Okay. And yeah, so thanks. Take 5. I'm going to remove the what's on the screen here real quick. Be right back with that. Oh, no, that's not going to work. All right. Still here. I'm just going to take a look at something. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. I hope this is working for you guys. I felt like it was a little ambitious trying to do a 3-hour ethics training, but I know so many, you know, ethics is something that we need to have, and we need to have 6 hours for our certification, and so some of you might really be in need of it. So I did it, and it feels okay on this end. Hopefully it feels okay on yours. And let's see. So I'm going to encourage questions, and what would really be great is I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I will actually end this just before 12:30, so you can take 2 minutes to do the short survey and post test, Christine. And so anyway, yeah, when we're doing the vignettes, it would be really great to have some interaction as we tackle this stuff. So it might be good to make sure that you know how to ask the question using the keyboard there. But if it's just not possible, it's not possible. So that's fine too. And okay, so let's go ahead and get back to it. So let's talk about, we're still under the umbrella here of protecting the client. And so in regards to loyalty, like what is the nature of this relationship, and where do our loyalties lie? Patient, family, mandatory reporting. So as part of the informed consent, we really do need to let them know what the exceptions to confidentiality are. They are our client and we work for them. We need to be very clear on that. And there are certain things that we need to report. We're mandated by law to report, and they need to know that this would not be us abandoning them and taking sides with the state. It would simply be that we're mandated to do this, and it doesn't mean anything about our therapeutic relationship. And then additionally, one thing that we need to be careful for is, like, let's say, we've been working with a family, and let's say, and I know, we have at least one interventionist with us today. We might be working with the family and doing an intervention, and let's say the person, what was decided was this person wasn't necessarily going to go into a formal treatment, but they were going to start, in individual counseling for this chemical dependence. And so if that was the case, and I've had similar things, although I don't do interventions, I have started with the family and got them started in recovery, and then they have convinced the identified patient to get into treatment. Everybody at that point knows, and when the person goes into individual counseling with me, everybody needs to know that a transition has now happened. That although you're still willing, that you're still there for the family, the person who is now there for the chemical dependence, that is the primary client. That person needs to be very clear. And if the family, this is just my policy, if the family wants to continue with counseling, I would refer them somebody with them, or I might continue to work with the family and refer the client to another individual counselor. But it may be that the family is working to get them in with me, and that's where they wanted to go. But however it ends up, whether it's the family or the client, everybody needs to know where the loyalties lie. So when I have this client in front of me, they need to know that I'm not just running to the family with what they're talking about. And so a lot of times also when I'm working with a client, their motivation needs to be pretty high. I like to think that my practice has integrity, and I'm not going to engage in something that I don't think has a really good chance at working or improving things for them. And so one thing that seems to improve success in this treatment milieu that I offer is to have one person in the family's life, in the person's life, that they sign a release for me to be able to talk to, and it's very specified, and it's usually all I can talk to them about is sobriety status and whether or not the client is showing up. And it creates just some accountability for them, and it also allows me that if the client isn't showing up and or has continuous relapse, that I'm able to bring the family in as we try to figure out what level of care and what resources and all that to make sure that this person continues to get what they need. But the client needs to know that it's limited to what is on that release form, that this is who I can talk to specifically, and this is specifically what I'm able to talk about, okay? And it must be in writing, and everybody needs to be clear on that. All right, and then referral. So remember, our scope of practice is specified. We're alcohol and drug counselors and addiction counselors, and so we work with clients and their families, and recovery is what we do, and anything that gets beyond our scope, we need to refer. And it's very important that when we refer, let's say we're actually referring somebody's care full on to another program or somebody else, we need to make sure that the person landed there, and the person that we're referring to needs to know, of course, that we're referring the care to them, that the client is now going to be under their care, because if not, we can be referring people and they just end up in limbo somewhere. So we want to make sure the connection has happened, and that the person that we're referring is aware. And then it's important for us to have a broad referral base, so that when we do have the need for referral, we can provide such referrals both expeditiously and providing the best resources that we can, because we know we have so many. and you know, collaboration. And actually, I used the example of working with the family. That this is kind of like the personal support. So it is important for us to collaborate, you know, to get input from family. I have a family questionnaire that I give the family members so that I can get input from them. You know, if the employer has sent somebody or DCFS, it is important for us to collaborate with them. We're protecting the client from bad consequences. You know, we're protecting them from losing their kids. We're trying to help protect them from going to jail. We're trying to help to protect them, you know, from losing their relationship or their job. And so we want to correspond. We want to let them know why we're corresponding. Of course, get their permission to do so, knowing that that we're doing it for them. That we're their advocate. That's what we're doing. We're advocating for them with these personal supports. And when we're bringing other professionals in, we're advocating for them to make sure that they're getting the help that they need. And so when we're talking about other professionals, we're protecting them against, like, you know, physical issues that could really hurt them down the road. So, you know, if we're referring to a psychiatrist, maybe there's some suicidal stuff going on. We're protecting them against themselves. So, so really holding ourselves out as advocates for our clients and really protecting them is really a primary responsibility for us. So, so the counselor-client relationship. So we're promoting client welfare and at the same time protecting their rights. Okay. So we're giving them good treatment and we're making sure that their rights are protected, and we're trying to give them everything that they need. And let's elaborate a little bit about on the counseling relationship. So there's a study. This is Dr. Neely and Miller. They did a study where they found that the contribution toward the outcomes or success of treatment from the treatment model or evidence-based technique is small to negligible. The actual, you know, in regards to what treatment model and what evidence-based technique is being used, it's the effect on success in treatment is small to negligible. They found only 1%, right? It almost has no impact. So, you know, no matter what treatment, you know, no matter what model I'm using, no matter what level of care, whatever evidence-based technique I'm using is very small. And they did this, there's this project match where they found, this is good for us to know, that treatment works better than no treatment. So treatment works, and then that no one treatment is better than the others. So if that's the case, and we're like trying to do everything we can to try to figure out what works, what is it that makes the most difference? Anybody know? See how fast you can type. What do you think makes the biggest difference in success in treatment? Anybody? Yeah, I don't know how fast or responsive this is. So, all right, it is, boom, therapeutic alliance, okay? Therapeutic alliance between the client and counselor in a planned, structured treatment plan is what creates positive outcomes. So what makes the biggest difference in counseling and our ability to help people is my therapeutic relationship with this client. And as I'm going around doing these group evaluations at these different programs, by the way, is just about my favorite thing to do other than like public speaking. I really enjoy doing this because there's some counselors that just aren't like really aware of just how important meeting their client like on an emotional level is. So the therapeutic alliance is, you know, this is where the client really truly gets that we care for them, right? And if I really care for a client and they're talking about something that's really painful, I'm going to feel something, right? And it's okay for me to show them that I'm feeling something. In fact, you know, I've had clients sharing with me something that's like really super painful, and I really care about them, and so therefore I'm feeling it. It might not surprise you knowing that, you know, that my tears might even come to my eyes. Now, I don't lose my composure. And it's not because I'm going into Bob's stuff. I'm just modeling, feeling for them. And if I have a client in front of me and they kind of get that I'm, that I care about them, but then they're seeing that kind of evidence that I care that much for them, that my pain, that their pain causes, that I'm feeling that too. I mean, that really helps the therapeutic relationship. And I'm demonstrating that I'm willing to go there with them. I'm willing to come over and sit in their pain with them, to hold their hand, not necessarily literally, and walk through this with them. And there's some counselors that just are super uncomfortable with doing that. And I'm working with people to just at least let's try to be mindful of this, and be mindful of when somebody is talking about something that's super painful for them, and they're coming from an emotional level, and they might even be showing the emotion. We need to stay there. We need to sit there with them in that. We need to encourage them. We need to provide empathy. We need to provide validation. We need to provide love and support, right? And stay on that emotional level. And then at some point, when we feel the time is right, then we can go back up into our head and talk about maybe what are the tools of recovery that we can use to get through stuff like this, and put it out for feedback to the group. So I think that empathy may be really the key to maybe the biggest factor in developing a therapeutic alliance. I can be there, and I can, they can kind of get just maybe from the the look on my face that I'm caring about them. But when I'm really in that with them and really feeling their pain with them, I don't think there's anything that develops that quicker. Now, you might say, well, wait, no, we're counselors, we've got to watch, we can't cross that line, we've got to maintain our composure, Okay, look, I get it, I understand that, but I'm not talking about losing it. I'm talking about staying completely present. I'm sitting in their pain with them. I'm giving them empathy. I'm there for them. This feeling, the feelings that I'm having, I'm protecting myself too. I'm not going too far. I can't go to where I have too much of a, where I have a stake in their sobriety, right? So I know where my line is, but for me to just go there and be there for the person emotionally, right? And not having my stuff be activated, but just staying there, I think that's a sign of even more stability, that I am actually able to go there with this person, maintain my composure, and still be their counselor, still be that rock, still be that person that they're counting on to treat them, okay? So it's something that for some of us comes very natural. Some of us really need to work on that. But I believe it's necessary, and I think we're all pretty capable of it, and I think the first thing is to be mindful of it. Be mindful of the tendency that when somebody is coming from an emotional level, our tendency to either bring them right to an intellectual level, or being there with them for a minute and bring it up to the intellectual level too soon, okay? So it's my take, but I feel pretty strongly about it, and so developing the therapeutic alliance. So in regards to the counseling relationship, just remember, if you're sizing yourself up against other counselors, this is where you start. What is your ability to develop a therapeutic alliance with this client? One where they trust you, where they feel like you have integrity, that you care about them, you're willing to go sit in their pain with them, and you're consistent, and somebody that they can rely on. Okay? Sorry if I ran that into the ground. All right. Let's see here. Okay. So, and then, so, in regards to, developing this therapeutic alliance, we're providing them obviously unconditional positive regard, ability to, warmly accept every aspect of their experience as valid and without conditions. No matter what they're talking about, we need to be with them and receive them and continue to be warm, no matter how difficult what they're talking about is. Sometimes our stuff can get in the way and can cause us maybe to lose that warmth. So we really got to be on guard for that. And so just under empathy, the ability to feel what the client is experiencing while maintaining enough distance to prevent the confusion. management of roles, which I tried to explain to you. We can go so far. All right, and then boundaries. So in regards to boundaries in this therapeutic relationship, this counseling relationship, the primary responsibility lies upon us. We need to communicate where the boundaries are, and if the boundaries start to get crossed, we need to just be really clear, on what the boundaries are, and so. One thing that I kind of have found personally in regards to this is that if I can endure what sometimes is very uncomfortable, the uncomfortable part about setting a boundary with a client, sometimes it can be initially uncomfortable, but it saves a heck of a lot more uncomfortability that results from me not setting those boundaries. Okay, so if I can set the boundary, deal with the uncomfortability of setting the boundary to begin with, it really saves me from future what could turn into ethical dilemmas. And so we need to be clear on them. And so Jennifer Burden, Dr. Burden, she talks about the difference between like a boundary crossing, whereas a boundary crossing might be self-disclosure or hiring a research assistant, attending the same church or meetings or whatever, and then a boundary violation, which would be like sex with clients, fraudulent billing, financial coercion or exploitation, receiving money for referrals, that kind of thing. And dual relationships. So I mean, we could do a whole hour and a half. We could probably do 3 hours on dual relationships. We're just going to touch on it here. By the way, I try to cover a lot of areas in this 3 hours. I do have a 6-hour version that I do live. I don't think I'm going to try to do that on a webinar. I try to cover as many bases as I can, and some of it is what I feel like is really important, and so some of it it might be like, oh yeah, others might be, oh yeah, so I hope I hope I'm hitting on the most important things. So dual relationships. So intimacy with clients. You might be surprised, as clear as people are, of how bad this is of having intimacy with clients. It still is the most violated ethical principle in our profession. Isn't that something? And I often tell students, I'll be in front of the classroom with students who, most of them haven't, yet worked in the profession at all. And when we talk about this, I can just see on their faces how disgusted they are with the idea that a counselor would actually have intimate relations or sex with a client. And the reality is that despite how wrong people think that is, it still happens. I mean, I'll bet you if you got a hold of the ethics chair for CCAP and asked what is the most violated ethical principle, I think he would probably say, yeah, that this is, and everyone that I've talked to has. I know Jennifer Burton had claimed this. I think our friend Aaron had said this as well. So anyway, and I think Rick would tell you the same thing. So and part of the issue here is in having any kind of, whether it's an intimate relationship or even a friendship, there's a power differential here. And so remember, this is important. You might be asked about this. So it's the power differential. So if I'm a counselor and I'm having a relationship with a client, there's a power. I'm in a position of power, which causes me to be just naturally exploiting the client. And sometimes we're developing this therapeutic alliance, which means that we're there for them emotionally. That can get confused sometimes for both the client and the counselor. So just need to I mean, we need to protect ourselves from this. We need to protect the client from this. And so the best way that I know to prevent this from happening is like the moment like any feelings start to happen is that you just call it out. You just call it out right now, so you've got some accountability, and invite the person to check in with you from time to time. It may be that you can't work with the person safely. But we just need to be mindful of this happening, and just be very clear, that I mean, it's just kind of like, you know, relapse. You know, we're having our clients have, you know, we want to put as many things in between them and their use as possible. Well, we kind of want to do the same thing. We want to catch this thing early, and we want to intervene on it before it goes anywhere. Because just like a relapse, you know, if the person gets too far along in the craving cycle, they're not going to use their tools of recovery. They're so emotionally bought in that it's almost too late, if you will. Well, I think the same can happen in a relationship. You know, relationships that can be a very strong draw. So we need to protect ourselves very early on, the moment that it begins to happen. And so some of you have heard of the 2-year rule. Don't know how you guys feel about that. It's very interesting that this 2-year rule is actually, I believe the MFTs have it. I believe social workers have it. I know CCAP. I think CCAP has it. The only one that I really know of that doesn't have this 2-year rule. Now I could be wrong about those others, but I'm pretty sure. The only one that I am sure about that doesn't have the 2-year rule is NADAC, which is very good, because you know, I don't think after 2 years you lose your power differential, right? And I think with the 2-year rule, like let's say you know, let's say the person is really falling for a client, and it's like now they're dealing with them and working with them, knowing in the back of their head in 2 years we might be able to do this. That's just so sick. We just need to get rid of that dynamic, okay? All right, let's see. So Jean says, because attraction is the most powerful positive emotion. Us addicts know that feeling very well, and we're powerless over it happening. There's the rub. And I mean, there lies the rub. Jean, completely agree. And very, very good, a very good point. Attraction is the most powerful positive emotion. And so we really got to be careful. I think all of us, even if you don't think it is, have in your head that this, if I don't watch it, this is possible for me. Just like the addict. If an addict thinks it's not possible that they're going to relapse, they're not going to do what they have to do to prevent it. If I think it's not possible for me to have intimate relationship with a client, then I'm not going to do what I have to do to prevent it. Okay? Yes, I'm coming on strong about it. And I got some distance, so you can't hammer me. No. All right, so and then clinical versus sexual intimacy. Yeah, so you know this. You know, we need to be clear in our heads. You know that this is a therapeutic intimacy. This is not. You know, I got it. Not crossing the line, and whenever it gets blurred, you know, I need to call it out to appear. And it can get confusing, especially for people that have, you know, issues. A lot of our clients have sexual issues, and they can confuse that clinical intimacy, that feeling, that me being there for them, my willingness to sit in their pain with them. Some of our clients have been looking for that for years. They maybe been looking at it for that in a relationship, like, and now you're bringing it to them. So it could be very tempting for them to like confuse what's happening here, and we just need to be clear on it. So, you know, it's very interesting. Dr. Burton tells a story in her book where a client had come on to her, and rather than like kind of having this attitude, oh boy, we got to make a change here because this person's, you know, coming on to me, and you know we can't possibly, you know, continue this. Now she's a therapist, and I don't know if I recommend this to us. It would take a heck of a lot of skill to do this, but I just want to share this because I think it's an awesome intervention. So she basically had a conversation with the client that first thought that that's not possible for us, and then proceeded to compliment this person who has had a history of bad relationships, and complimented this person on the fact that, wow, you actually are seeing, you know, some things in me that you would consider to be a healthy relationship, right? I consider myself to be a healthy person, and that's something that you saw as being attractive. So that's really great. So take that as you know, when you decide, you know, it's time for you to have a relationship or pursue such a relationship, you know what the healthy looks like, and you know something that's healthy that you would look for. And then there was also a thing, and like, you know what, that's so great that you had the guts to even like ask that of me. You saw something that was attractive to you, and you decided to go ahead and take a risk and do that. Good for you. And I hope that you're able to maybe do that when it's time for you to you know, to have a relationship. And it was, I won't go further into it, but I just thought it was just like really awesome what she did. So there was no shame. She was very clear that this isn't something that can happen, and she actually turned it into some positives for this client. Just fabulous. Okay, so all right, other issues like hugging. Boy, you guys, I, in my very early career, I did not hesitate to hug like anybody. I always did it. And there were some times where people, it was almost like I could feel they were involuntarily doing it, and then I'm like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But it didn't stop me. I kind of did it, and it took a little while. And just because I'm just an affectionate guy, and I want these people to know how much I care for them. But it's just really not okay for me to just indiscriminately go and reach and hug people. As much as I love them and care for them, and you know, I really got to watch it for many different reasons. One is the person just, I mean, because of their background, they just might be really super uncomfortable with that. It could be misinterpreted, and you know, quite frankly, it could get you in legal trouble if somebody, you know, sees it as being something other than it is. So, you know, you can make your own decisions if somebody is reaching for a hug, whether or not you want to do that. But you know, I mean, sometimes I kind of get the impression that maybe somebody, you know, could use a hug. I think maybe sometimes I would say, you know, if you're, you know, if you're feeling like a hug, I'm there for you, or would you like a hug, or you know, something like that. But that's about as far as I'll go. You know, I don't like non-verbally just, you know, just come in like that. And everybody's going to have their own take on it, but I am like way more careful with it than I used to be. Some people might even say me even like suggesting that would not be okay. Some people might even say that even if it's requested, it wouldn't be okay. I know I had a therapist once who just, he just would not hug. He just did not do it. He just felt like it was, or actually, you know what, he wanted to talk about it. He's like, what are you coming in for a hug for? What is it that you what does this mean to you? And we could have actually had the dialogue, and then maybe he would have done it, but he just wasn't going to do it right away. So I just want to put it on your radar that it shouldn't be an automatic response for you. Pre-existing relationships. So let's say you have a buddy or an old friend or an old relationship with somebody, intimate relationship. We really should not be their counselor, because there's just like right when that happens, there's instantaneously a dual relationship, and that's just not healthy. Relatives or family members or associates of clients, we don't want to have any extra stuff, right? We want to start clean. And if we have options, now it may be that there just, you know, isn't options. I know that we had a situation where like a couple came in and they wanted treatment. Well, we put one in the day group, one in the evening group, and then in family group it wasn't an issue because it was both of their family groups. We've had siblings come into treatment. So if at all possible, we don't want to be in a situation where we're treating under those kinds of circumstances. I had actually a recent thing where a friend of mine from church had a friend who was really hesitant to get into treatment, really felt like it would be good for them to meet with me. And so I decided, just like for intervention purposes, to just kind of see where the person was at, and just see if I felt comfortable in working with them or if they needed a referral. And so I did the assessment, And the person really wasn't, they weren't really quite ready to pull the trigger on formal rehab. And so I decided to go ahead and see him a second time. And it just didn't feel right. Because I started thinking to myself, what if this doesn't go well? What if, because bad things happen sometimes, and then, what does that do for our relationship over here? And, and would I truly be able to treat this client the same way as somebody who didn't have a friend that I knew? It just didn't feel right. And so I went ahead and referred them to somebody else, to another independent clinician. So it's just an example of that. Okay, and then other issues like friend post-treatment. So is it okay for me to be a buddy with, my, with an old client? I don't think so. I think ethically, if you stand back and look at it neutrally, it's probably not okay. I know people that have done it. I could maybe go along with the 2-year rule for that, maybe. I don't know, I'd have to think about that. But again, it's a balance of power thing. And then 12-step meeting attendance, we want to, so what happens if, like, you go to a meeting and one of your clients is at that same meeting? How do you act? I mean, if you show that you know the person and acknowledge them and say hi and everything, and other people there know that you're a counselor, maybe that tells everybody, oh, this must be an old client of his. What if I'm actually at the podium and I'm giving a pitch? That's tough. But I've had to really kind of censor my talk a little bit because I actually had an active client one time in there. So I didn't like having that situation, and there were some things that I kind of weeded out of my pitch. I think the best way is to prepare for this ahead of time and to talk to the client beforehand. If I see you at the supermarket or if I see you at a meeting, how do we handle that? Okay. Would you like me to just say hi and go on my merry way? Would you like me to ignore you? What is that? And so if I do ignore them, that will be prearranged. We'll know that I just don't want to talk. It's not that I don't want to talk to him or don't want to see him. It's just that we prearranged this, and I'm to, like, not acknowledge you. If we've said just hi, then, and we've agreed that that's what it is, then just hi doesn't mean, oh, I don't want to go over and talk to him because I'm happy to see him. It's just because we prearranged that it's just a hi. If they're comfortable with the approach and having a conversation, well, then, then you prearrange that as well. Okay, excuse me. Okay, and then, so counseling in regard to transference, and this is important, you might need to know this in a post-test. Transference, so the tendency for clients to displace feelings for someone such as a family member, spouse member, or employer onto the clinician. So they're displacing their feelings they have on somebody else that you may be reminding them of. And when this happens, it can really be a therapeutic opportunity to, like, get them to maybe see something. But we also want to be careful because we may be going into their past, with this, and so we want to bring a supervisor into it to, to talk about it if we have any questions about where we're going. Is within our scope. And there's counter transfers, which is just like kind of the opposite of this. Instead of the client doing this with us, we're doing it with the client. And here's the important part of this: any counter transference, this is not a therapeutic opportunity. And this is not something that we would discuss with the client. Oh, I just want to let you know, yeah, I had, no. Do not talk to clients about your counter transference. You can talk to your supervisor, you can talk to a mentor, and you should. But we don't talk to the client about our counter transference because that's getting into our stuff, and we don't want to bring our stuff into that. Okay. All right, and then so termination. So sometimes we want to keep clients too long. Some of the reasons for that is we enjoy working with them. It gives us, kind of a sense of purpose, to have people like depending on us. And I just hate that idea that clients are dependent on us. Every time I sit down with a client and accept them as a client, I let them know right from the beginning that my job is to work myself out of a job with them. Our work is based on you not needing me anymore. Okay, and then sometimes the client might have completed their goals, what they want to have completed, but maybe they haven't completed the goals that I want for them. Well, if they've completed their goals and maybe let's say I thought maybe something would be a good idea for them to work on, my goals, and I have mentioned it to them, but they have no desire to work on that, well, we don't go longer to try to convince them of that. If their goals have been met, then it's time to move on. So bottom line is we terminate the client when they're no longer benefiting from our care. We don't want to keep them because it brings in income. We don't want to keep them because we're like an important part of the recovery program. Although I will tell you that, like that man that I told you that wasn't going to meetings, the man that didn't believe in a higher power, the man that I was helping develop the sober support system, I did keep that one a little bit longer than I normally would have, because I was, naturally an integral part of his program there. And once I felt confident that his support system was going to be enough for him, then we moved on from it. Okay, so here's the four pillars, and this is borrowed from the medical ethics field, and it's beneficence, autonomy, non-maleficence, and justice. And this is a really good thing to add to your lens by which you look at ethical situations. So beneficence is basically actions intended to benefit others, kindness, charity, goodness. A good way to remember what beneficence is it's similar to the word benefit, right? Beneficence, benefit. Okay, and then autonomy is self-directed freedom and independence. We want to teach our clients autonomy. We want to empower them to be autonomous. We want them to not need us to make their decisions for them. We want them to develop problem-solving skills. We want them to be able to self-direct and the freedom that results from that. We want them to be independent, to think independently and to make good decisions for themselves. And they have that right to do that. So, and then non-maleficence, which is do no harm, which some consider to be the first rule. That's our number one rule. The work that we do no harm. I think that's a good principle to follow. and then justice, the equal and fair treatment across groups or members of the same group. That we want to treat people fairly. Okay, so let's take a look at vignette, this vignette number one. We're not going to go all full on into vignettes, but I just want to let's just kind of take a break off of the principles and I want you to look at this with that lens of the beneficence and the four pillars, and you might even bring in the tiers. As well, but we're going to get back to that later. So you're working with a woman who's been sharing about her neighbor, whom she shares is her only friend. I want your fingers on the keyboard, by the way, you guys, because I'd like you to chime in here. But she's a meth addict, and they used to use together. So you've been encouraging your client to spend less time with her. And one day she shares that the neighbor is a single mom with 4 children, and it sounds as if she has been abusing and neglecting her children. You're worried for their safety, but you're unsure what to do because the info was shared with you confidentially about somebody who is not your client, and somebody you've never met. So what's you guys' take on this? How should you handle this? Should this be reported? I don't see any hands. I don't see any questions. Give me an answer. Who can give me an answer? This may not just work. I don't know how responsive this is, but let's give it a go. So I'm going to give some things to look at, if you chime in, maybe it'll be a little bit later. Maybe you're not into it, but okay. So I think my take is the number one answer is okay. So let's say we take do no harm. Let's say non-maleficence. Does that apply here? Well, there's a chance that these children will continue, these children may continue to be harmed if I don't report it. Beneficence. If I report it, it may benefit the children. Go back to non-maleficence. How might this affect my relationship with my client if I do this? Justice. Am I giving these children a fair shake if I know about this and I'm not reporting it? So that would be an example of looking at this just using the pillars. Now, if I bring in the tiers, now we got stuff that, like, if that wasn't enough, because like even just using those pillars, I'm kind of feeling like I should report this. Not to mention the fact that if I found, like if I knew about this and I didn't report it, and then one day my client tells me that these children were these children were abused and beaten, and one of the children ended up in the hospital or worse, I would feel horrible. I couldn't live with that. I just am not willing to have that. So so that my personal, that's where I'm, that's one of the tiers. It's federal, state, licensure, agency, personal. So that would be the personal thing. But let's go through. So there's the federal tier, the HIPAA and the CFR 42. There is language in there, with the exception, I think in CFR 42 Part 2, there is some language in there about confidentiality, except when there's abuse issues. State is very clear. In the state of California, we have mandatory reporting. So if I'm going by the tiers, state requires me, if I have knowledge of this, to report it. And that trumps the personal thing. Like, even if I felt like, no, I don't feel like this is the right thing to do. I don't even know this person. It was secondhand information or whatever. Even if I felt that way, the state is a higher tier, and I would trump that. So I wanted to just, give that example. By the way, you may not even be aware, but it was really cool back when I was part of the leadership of CADAC. I believe Father Jack was the president of CADI at the time, and we joined forces. I think it was Father Jack Kearney that initiated it, and he basically he discovered that we were not on the mandatory reporting list. Like, we were not mandated reporters. We were not on that long list, and so he basically got this legislation drafted. He pulled CCAP into it, and we joined forces and got that thing passed. And now we, as certified alcohol and drug counselors, are mandated reporters. So do you see how I've taken like the pillars and the tiers as the lens by which to look at this? And you guys still have an opportunity to say, Bob, you're crazy. This is how it should be handled, and I will watch for that. Okay, so again, in regards to the dual relationships, conflict of interest. So what are some examples of dual relationship? Well, it could be intimate relationships. It could be somebody who is I'm in a business deal with. It could be a neighbor, a relative, a buddy. It could be some mutual interest that we maybe we're board members or fellow board members or something. It could be something as simple as, the smoking buddies thing. I mean, anything that creates, something that goes beyond counselor-client relationship. And then what are some examples of conflict of interest? Well, one we mentioned earlier, which I had insisted on that firewall between the person that's making all the money at this program and the person who's making the clinical decisions. The conflict of interest is if I stand to lose tens of thousands of dollars by discharging a client, it could taint my decision. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cultural diversity. So first, I'd like to just kind of define some terms. So culture refers to a group in which one is a member that holds rules, values, and norms agreed upon and upheld by all members of that shared culture, okay? As opposed to race, which refers to physical characteristics such as the color of a person's skin, or ethnicity, which refers to a learned behavior, particularly traditions and customs, and based on the region from which the person is from. So now, there are so many different cultures. And by the way, culture, you know, yes, there are certain ethnicities where we can, you know, where we would refer to maybe, you know, somebody, let's just say, because there's overlap between the two, but let's just say, you know, cultures that are based on, you know, that are just, you know, based on region, right? So it could be Asian, Hispanic, African American, Caucasian. Okay, so those, you know, Jewish, those could all be different cultures, but it's not, and, you know, so so culture, I said Jewish, that's kind of regional, and could be regional, and, you know, religious, right? So culture, so religion could be considered a culture. What else? Age is cultural awareness that we need to have. Sex, it's a man or a woman, or other. It could be weight, or otherwise appearance. It could be drug of choice, like an alcoholic might be treated differently than a drug addict or other drug addict. Let's say opiate addict, meth addict, coke addict. So there's many different types of cultures, and so for us to just know about every culture and be very well versed on every culture, it's really not practical. We can't know everything about every culture. Do we strive to try to learn as much as we can? Like if I don't really know the, say, Hispanic culture very well, should I go to, like, you know, a cultural competence in regards to Hispanics? Yes, absolutely. I should bone up on that. I mean, it would help me with the you know, the Hispanic clientele that I have. But there's many different cultures, and so instead, so I'm going to strive to try to learn what I can about the different cultures. But there's another way, and it's really kind of a must for me to do, and I can very effectively and very efficiently understand the person that's in front of me and their culture and how it affects them. And so, so these are some questions that you can ask. And so, essentially, according to Dr. Burton again, so with what race, ethnic group, or minority, if applicable, do you most identify? So what is your culture? What is your minority that you most identify with? How has your race, ethnicity, natural origin, minority group, age, sex, whatever, played a role in your experiences, positive or negative? And do you expect those things to have a positive or negative impact on your recovery efforts? Or has it already had an impact? Tell me more about that. And then, is there anything else you want me to know about that stuff that will help me better serve you? So I am outwardly, overtly disclosing my interest in understanding this person in front of me. And I get to let them, not through, because even if I learn stuff in books about a certain culture, that might not apply to that person in front of me. So in this way, I understand what their culture is, how is that, minority or whatever affected you? How might that affect your treatment? And is there anything else I need to know? What do I need to pay attention to be the best counselor I could be given your culture? What is it that I need to know? man, if you do that and you're able to have that conversation, then that's going to go a heck of a long way. And I think we're doing our due diligence if we're doing that to do what we have to do. Okay, and then there's also ethical conduct with other professionals. You know, so we're consulting. So let's make sure we're consulting with other professionals for the sole purpose of benefiting a client. Don't go off and have side conversations laughing at a certain client or making fun of them. You know, I mean, sometimes we need some comic relief, you know, in our profession. There's some really hard stuff, but doggone it, let's not do it at the expense of our clients. We often will have professional differences of opinion. And so, excuse me. And it's okay for us to have differences of opinion. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. They're just differences. And so, just, you know, be okay with it. Let other people have different takes, and always be respectful with other professionals. And then we do have, now I gotta tell you, this used to be, and I don't think it is anymore, although I think they're making some more changes to the KDAC, the CCAP Code of Ethics. What used to say very clearly is that if I know of an ethical violation and I don't report it, I am being unethical. In fact, I could be reported. Okay, it was very clear. It somehow came out. I don't like that it came out, but I still think and believe that that is our ethical responsibility. If we are seeing unethical behavior, we need to either try to approach what's happening and see if we can affect the change, and if we can't, we need to report it. I think ethically that is our responsibility. We need to protect our profession from people that are doing stuff that can hurt clients and can make our profession look bad. I would say in that order too. Okay, and then so competence. So, you know, we have obligations to understand our code of ethics. We only accept employment where we're qualified. We have an obligation to continue our education, as we mentioned earlier, and as we mentioned, to operate within our scope of practice. Okay. And then, you know, further in regards to responsibilities to our profession, we should be promoting the highest standards. Boy, I've made it, that's been something that's been really important to me, something that I've worked on as a part of the board and leadership of the old KDAC is I really think that we need to be the best that we can be. And so I really promote high standards, and I subscribe to high standards, and I set high standards for myself. You know, let's behave in ways that if everybody behaved as we did, that our profession would be held up in high esteem. And it will protect the integrity of our profession. And so, and then we want to share knowledge. You know, along the road, we may discover things that like are working, and we want to, you know, we should share it with other people. So like, we don't want to just keep that our secret. Oh man, I'm doing better than everybody else. No, let's share it with other people so that they too can be, you know, using this intervention. And so if all of us are sharing, I mean, I just wish there was kind of a better mechanism by which we could be sharing information, like that we had a better mechanism, you know, of best practices. I know that NATAP has some stuff going on in that direction, but I don't know that very many people are aware of it and involved in it. In fact, I would just kind of get some emails from them, and I really want to look more into it because it seems like they're moving in a direction of really helping programs across the country, you know, about what works. And to be educated on about what works. And, you know, accrediting bodies actually do pretty good at this too. That's one of the most valuable things out of like a CARF accreditation or a joint commission, is that they come in and they're seeing programs all around the country and they're giving us ideas of stuff that we're struggling with. So share knowledge is important. And our responsibility to society. So we want to advocate for elements or actions that ease the cost of addiction. I actually created a nonprofit that kind of went away because of the fact that with the Medi-Cal waiver, which is just awesome. We want to invite others to participate in shaping policy, and my invitation to you is if like you're not on, if you're not a member of, a professional certifying body, become that, because then you get notified of opportunities to send letters to your legislators. We actually had created a thing where we send all of our members, this was back in the KDAC days, where we send all our members this form letter, and you can tweak it and do whatever you want with it, and you put your zip code in, and hit enter, and it goes to all of your legislators, both on a local and national level. It's a pretty awesome thing, and it's still there, and they still use it. So if you're not getting those kinds of emails, contact CCAP and make sure that you get on those email lists. And then act to ensure the choice and opportunity for all people, and respect and protect the civil and legal rights of all people. That's a responsibility to society. And so a little bit about confidentiality. I mean, this is one of the most important things in our profession, because our clients need to be able to be honest and open and forthright in their programs and in their groups. And so there's 3 specific legal constructs that we'll talk about. One is privileged communication, one's privacy, and one's confidentiality. Let's just break those down a little bit. So privileged communication, it restricts information and knowledge shared between a client and a specific professional. A lot of us are aware of the client attorney privilege. That's what we're talking about here. So that same thing applies for the work that I'm doing with a client. That's privileged information, and it should be sharing it with others. And then there's privacy. So the client gets to choose in what circumstances his or her information is shared, including what, when, and with whom. And that should happen in the informed consent, and our release form should really specify that. It's like they're giving permission for us to talk to the specific person, and about what specific things and for what specific purpose. And if the informed consent is adequate, they'll know what to expect, and treatment is what is expected of them. And then confidentiality is the client's duty to protect the client's information from unapproved sources. So sources that were not approved by the client, excuse me. And the types of people who want info, might exchange info with their family, physicians, social workers, other professionals. Well, what if the client doesn't cooperate? Let's say this person is at risk of losing their children, and they need to get treatment because CFS says this is what they need to do to get their children back, or to not lose their children, whatever the case may be. But they don't want to sign a release for us to talk to the social worker. Well, we know that what's in their best interest, is if they want their children, they're verbalizing that they want their children, or that they don't want their children taken away, yet they're unwilling to do that. So, if we're clear, and we're saying, look, I know this is, I want you to make decisions for yourself, but if you don't give me permission to talk to them, then we're not going to be able to give them the information they need to not take your children, or to, give your children back. So I just want to know, make sure that you're clear on this, and that this is what you're deciding on. You may change your mind later, but I want you to be real clear. And then, maybe once that's happened, I think they should have the autonomy to make that decision. So that would be one of the pillars to consider. But it would be best if they want their children back. There's beneficence, so I might really explore with them. Wait, okay, on one hand, you want your children back, but here you're not giving me a release to talk to them. So let's talk about this discrepancy, because we know that getting their children back, they verbalize to us that they want that, and that would be what's best, for the client. Okay, and then a publicly spoken and written material. So when we are speaking, we should be giving the source, and written material, we need to not plagiarize and make sure that we are giving credit where credit's due. Technology, we're talking about protecting clinical information. So if I can't be, I can't be talking about, client, I can't be talking about a client, without their personal, without their permission. Certainly, I don't think we would ever want to bring up their name. But there might be a certain case that you would like to talk to the person about, or that you would like to bring up in your speech or write about. But there's some specifics, maybe not identifying, or maybe what you don't think is identifying. We really should get permission for the client. Say, hey, I'm writing this up and I'd like to use your case. I won't provide any identifying information. Is it okay if I use that? And then in regards to technology, this is really something that I think we're still all kind of trying to come to terms with all the hackers that that are around. It's really important that we are protecting our our computers and our data systems so that they can't be hacked. And so we want to make sure that we're hiring somebody to come in to make sure that this information is protected. And then so the protection of clinical information, the key to upholding the principles involved with the protection of clinical material is to respect the tiers. So we talked about the tiers, before, and really in regards to confidential information, this would be the #1 thing that we would add to our lens of, as we're trying to figure out what is the right thing to do, what is the ethical thing to do, we start with these tiers, okay? And so, we keep this in mind when we're looking at some of these vignettes, because there's really some of these vignettes where there's some personal stuff that might get involved, and notice personal is on the bottom, and it may well be trumped by higher tiers. So, and then like we can use the tiers also, like in regards to the spoken material. So we might personally feel like this person wouldn't mind if I shared this case, but the federal laws may say no. You can't assume that. You need to ask them and get a release. Okay? So you can't actually use a lower tier to trump a higher tier. It's actually the opposite of that. So the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 42, Part 2. This is like a distinction between the CFR 42 and HIPAA. So the CFR 42 Part 2 is protection of the release of any information that identifies them as a user of drugs and alcohol, and it was created because of the stigma. So remember this one, okay? You might be asked about it later. So the CFR 42 Part 2 is a protection of the release of information that identifies a client as an alcohol or drug user, okay? And there's a societal stigma that's associated with being, an alcoholic or an addict. And so this law was created so we can't divulge any information that identifies them as such. And then, there's HIPAA, which is also federal. It's an acronym for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was passed by Congress in '96, and HIPAA does all of these things. It provides the ability to transfer and continue health insurance coverage for millions of workers and families when they change or lose their jobs. It reduces healthcare fraud and abuse, mandates industry-wide standards for healthcare information, electronic billing, and other processes. And this is the one that applies most to us, which is requires the protection and confidential handling of protected health information. So we are bound by federal law to make sure that their health information does not fall into the wrong hands. And so, like, if you have a laptop that doesn't have protection on it and you lose it and you have client information there, I've heard that you could actually be fined $20,000 for each case there. That could get pretty doggone costly. So we really, and HIPAA, I mean, this is really an enforced thing. So be really careful about handling it. And just, if you haven't paid attention to the technology piece of this, that you have client information in the computer to make sure that your network and your computers are protected against somebody hacking and getting in there. Okay, and so then we have state, which, an example of the state tier is mandatory reporting. Then you have licensure, which is the code of ethics and scope of practice. You have agency, which is the policy and procedures and employee manuals. And then you have personal, which is what you think is the right thing, your internal ethics and morals. And it's not okay to choose the more lenient option. So as I said, the feds say you can't use client information in public speech, but personally, the client would approve. Your personal tier does not trump the federal tier. Okay. So, so TerraSoft, you might also need to know this one later, might be asked about it. So TerraSoft versus the Regents of University of California. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this. So it was a case in the Supreme Court in California held that mental health professionals have a duty to protect individuals who are being threatened with bodily harm by a patient. The original 74 decision mandated warning the threatened individual, but in '96 they did a rehearing, and the Supreme Court called for a duty to protect the intended victim. So the professional, may discharge, that duty in many ways, including, so not only warning the person, but we need to take some action to protect them. So that might include getting the police involved to make sure that this person is being protected, or take some sort of reasonable steps to protect the individual. Okay, so that's TerraSoft. All right. And then, okay, so let's go back to this vignette number 1. So this is just the second half of it. So, remember one day she shares, the neighbor has a single mom. She's a single mom, 4 kids. Sounds like they're being abused. You're worried for their safety, but unsure because the information was shared with you confidentiality. So you're not sure whether you should report it. So you can take the tiers into account here. So personally, I'm kind of not feeling, I kind of got this, from, a second hand, and, and let's just say they said it was their next door neighbor, so I actually know where they live. So I did have the information maybe that I needed to report it, but I personally don't think it's the right thing to do. There's nothing in my agency, or my policy and procedure that says that, that I have to do that. It's unclear, maybe with, it may or may not be clear with, if I look at my code of ethics. Let me have a look at that. But state, it's very clear. If I know of somebody, children who are being abused or neglected, or elderly people are abused or neglected, I have a responsibility. It's a state regulated law. I mean, it's a regulation that says I have to report it. So the state trumps any of that other stuff. So no matter what I think in my gut, the state requires me to do that. All right. Again, I know you guys aren't really too active in the discussion. Maybe it's not practical. I didn't really know how this would work, but you do have the opportunity to push back on any of these takes that I have. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's look at let's see how we're doing on time here. All right, I got about 15 minutes or so. So let's tackle a couple more of these vignettes. So the father of a client call states he has information that's vital to his daughter's treatment. You put the caller on hold and look into the client's file to see if there's a release to speak with the father. You find there's no release to speak with him. You come back to the phone and tell the father that due to federal confidentiality laws, you can't confirm or deny the person's there in treatment. So father gets all angry and says, look, I brought the client there. I know she's there, and the information's really important. You apologize, repeat the confidentiality statement, and let the father know that you can listen to the information, but not disclose whether or not the client is there. Is this okay? Anybody got a take? I'm going to give you a chance to chime in here. And I won't even say your name, so you can be wrong. You won't be embarrassed. Okay. So, all right, well, my take is no, not okay. Because if the client is not there, would I really make the statement that says, well, I don't have a release to talk to you, but you can go ahead and give me the information, right? I wouldn't do that if the client, so there's an implied, if I'm listening to that information, that could be implied that the client is there, even without saying it, right? And what I could do is I could go to the client and say, I needed to let you know that your father called. He said he had really important information that he wanted to give us, but we didn't have a release in the file to talk to him. Would you like us to give a release to speak with him? Would you like to put him on file as being able to disclose information to him or to talk to him about your treatment? And if they say no, it's like, okay, well, and if, maybe if they're allowed to make phone calls, maybe they, okay, well, you might want to check in with them just to make sure everything's okay. All right. So that would be a way of doing that. By the way, if you're going to check the chart, you don't go, okay, hang on a minute so I can see if there is a release of information to speak with you in the chart, right? Because right there you're telling them that the client's there. You can't do that. All right. So then, let's see so let's do this one, vignette number 3. So you have a patient in treatment. She's doing really well. Due to the neglect of her 2 children as a result of her meth addiction, DCFS has placed the children in foster home. Excuse me. This devastated the patient to the point of finally entering treatment. If she completes the outpatient portion of the program and other requirements, she will get her children back. What's going on here? There we go. 3 months into treatment, the patient reports a relapse, and in the course of the disclosure, you find out the patient was driving while intoxicated with the children in the car. Should you report it to DCFS, despite the fact that it would devastate the patient, would destroy your therapeutic alliance, would likely result in her not completing treatment, and would possibly result in never getting her children back? Boy, that's a tough, complicated one, isn't it? So there might be a lot of reasons. So we could take the pillars here, beneficence, what is going to be best for what's going to have the best benefit for the client. There could be non-maleficence here, where there's do no harm, which is we maybe need to protect the children. We have justice. Maybe there's a justice thing in regards to the children. So there's kind of it goes both ways there. If we go back to the tiers, personally, I might feel like, look, I know that there's reasons to do this, but you know what? If I do, this person is doing so well. This is the disease. Most people relapse. I don't think this person should lose their children because they had one relapse. If I do this, it's going to rock this treatment. They're probably going to leave. They're probably never going to get their children back. So I'm not going to do it. That might be a personal take that you have in this situation. But the reality is that personal is at the bottom rung of the tiers. And the second rung of the tiers is the state. And the state says that if I suspect child abuse, I need to report it. It's a slam dunk, you guys. I'm sorry, but we have to do that. And there's other personal stuff that I think I can throw into the mix here that helps me with this. And it is something that I mentioned earlier. I would feel so bad if I did not report this and it happened again and they were all killed in an auto wreck. I had the ability to stop that, or I had the ability to help to at least give it to somebody who could have stopped it, and I didn't do it. I was playing God. I made this decision. Maybe I need to trust that there are human beings at DCFS who might agree with my take. Maybe when I talk to DCFS about this, or when I'm reporting this, I can, or when I'm talking to DCFS, I can let them know, look, this person is doing so well, and I really want to advocate for them. I'm hoping that this isn't what causes her to lose her children, because she's doing so well. I have high hopes, and I would, I'm hoping that you will not just take this incident, but rather a non-compliance for treatment to base your decision on. So there's ways that we can advocate without going against the law, which if we didn't do this, it would be against the law. I'm not seeing any pushback. Okay, wait a minute, I got 11 questions. Oh, wait, okay, you know what, I just didn't scroll. I got all kinds of stuff here. So let's see here, what do we got? So contacting CPS to look into it. Everyone's a mandated reporter, regardless of possible abuse towards anyone. Okay, thank you for that. So it seems like you agree, I mean, towards anyone. Yeah, so there's an agreement there. This is a great opportunity to express your dilemma with the client so she sees the repercussion of her choices. That way, when you contact the appropriate agency about this, she sees what responsible behavior looks like. Boom, great feedback. I think, you just turn this into like a direct therapeutic intervention. And so you actually are allowing the person to see just how big these consequences could be of the using. You're modeling what appropriate behavior is, what responsible behavior looks like. It can also be your opportunity to share with the client that, look, we have to report this, but I want to let you know I'm going to do everything I can to advocate for you because you're doing a great job. You had a relapse, and I'm going to be talking to DCFS about this, and so you're then coming alongside the person. So really good take there. Thank you very much for that. So we just learned that I need to look at the number of questions rather than counting on this little small window that I have here. I think I've got to them all now. Okay, I think I got that right. So, all right, let's see, where are we at here time-wise? Okay, so we're winding up here. So let's, you know what, I'm going to go directly to this. I'm going to go to one last vignette. And this one, Meredith is 17 years old, has a long history of fighting amphetamine dependence and bulimia, and has sought treatment from different sources. Recently, her parents told her that if she did not seek help to manage her addiction, they would hospitalize her. She sets up an appointment with an AOD counselor and begins by stating that she will refuse to see a physician for a medical checkup because she knows what they'll do to her. She tells the counselor that if she is not willing to see her under these circumstances, she will stop treatment. Okay, and so the counselor accepts this client under these conditions, hoping to be able to convince her to be evaluated medically and eventually seek treatment for her eating disorder. After several weeks in treatment, the counselor receives a call from the client's parents telling her that Meredith died suddenly of a heart attack. Wow, crazy, huh? So I'd like to get you guys' take on that, if you would. So there's a lot of different angles here. So take a good look at this slide to see what you need to know there, and then I'm going to land on the other slide. So the counselor accepts this, hoping to be able to convince the client to be evaluated and eventually seek treatment. Okay. And now I'm going to put up this last slide because there's other stuff in there that maybe you can grab onto. So what do you guys think here? Did the counselor do the right thing? What should have been done differently, and why? To start with, to start with, I think I would just, like, while you guys might be typing your stuff, I'm going to start with by saying that there's no indication here that a supervisor was brought in. And so I really think that, you know, the clinical supervisor should have been brought into this. I think the physician should probably have been brought into this. It seems that the counselor may have made the decision on her own. And, you know, I mean, there's a case there. Yeah, okay, well, like, you know, there's one foot in the door here. This is where we need to meet her. Let's see if we can convince her to do this stuff. And I'm pretty good at this. And so maybe I can do that. And this is a good chance for her to have this as an entry point, you know, an entry point. But the reality is that it seems that maybe she's making decisions that are beyond her scope of practice. And so we want to bring in probably medical personnel. So to my medical director, here's the situation. I don't really like that this person is trying to like control the treatment and you know kind of flex. You know, she's going to dictate how her treatment is going to go. But this is an entry point. She's refusing to see a doctor at this point. But this is what her medical history is. This is what she's dealing with the bulimia. Do you think that I should take this client on and try to convince the person to see you, or should I insist that they see a doctor in order for us to see the person? Okay, so I think really that would have been a great way to handle it. The other thing that I think is important to point out here is this point. Recently, her parents told her that if she did not seek help to manage her addiction, they would hospitalize her. So if she did not seek help for the addiction, they would hospitalize her. So if we said, nope, we're not going to see you under those circumstances, we can't have you dictating treatment this early, or your physical condition is such that we just can't take a chance on that. We need you to get a medical checkup. We'd love to treat you. But, you know, and maybe you do at the assessment, maybe do some, you know, motivational interviewing or whatever I have to do to see if I can get that person to do it on the spot. But if they don't do it, then I'm sorry, we can't do this unless you see a physician. And then the parent, if they're not able to get on our program, look, the parent said they were going to hospitalize her if she didn't do this. So there's a little bit of leverage there. So anyway, that's just a take. It looks like I have another take here. So ask her, why are you bargaining about the solution? How about we start doing some work together and we discuss this more along the way? So yeah, and I'm thinking more like on the spot, you know, right there. Let's talk about this, you know, and trying to meet them, you know, where they're at and doing some motivational interviewing. And then I think probably, I don't know, probably my take is if there was a second session, I'd really need to bring medical personnel into that decision. So you guys, thank you very, very much for attending today. It's not what I'm used to in doing a talk without having you in front of me. I hope you found value in it. And I hope to see you later on in some of our live talks. I'll be announcing some very soon for this fall. Thanks for all you do in this profession. You're awesome. Those of you who are watching live, please stay on the line because you're going to be automatically sent a short survey and some brief post-test questions, and then when you hit submit, I will then generate your certificate based on those responses. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for attending, and God bless you all. Take care. Bye-bye.